Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to today's pre-recorded webinar. This is a Hospitable pre-recorded webinar, and we're joined by PriceLabs today. We've got Kyle on the line. Hello, Kyle. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Miles, and I appreciate you having us here.
No worries. So for today, we're kind of going to go through a bit of an overview of the US market, short-term rentals, diving into some pricing data, looking at 2024 and 2025 so far. And I think Kyle's going to kind of break it down, looking at urban versus rural a little bit with two key examples. And I think what we'll try to do along the way is kind of talk about how you could apply that to your property and your market and what you should be thinking about for the rest of 2025. So hopefully there's some useful nuggets in there and some kind of eye-opening statistics in Kyle's presentation. Okay, Kyle, I think you can take it away.
All right. Well, I'm excited, and thank you very much again for having me, Miles. Little background information about myself. My name's Kyle Driskell. I'm a senior solutions consultant with PriceLabs. I've been in the tool literally every day for about the past 4 years or so. Love data, love presenting data to folks. So hopefully you can get some really useful nuggets out of this today. But if you don't, always reach out to us at PriceLabs, support at pricelabs.co. If you ever have any questions about revenue management, we're always happy to help you. So let's go ahead and get going. So a little bit about this. We're not going to spend too much time on any of these in particular. I do want to have a little bit of an introduction to PriceLabs at the beginning. Then we're going to look at some really important key performance indicators. Those indicators that we're going to look at occupancy. So I think everybody kind of knows what occupancy is. We're also going to look at ADR, which is your average daily rate, the average of the average of the rates that you charge for a stay. Then we're also going to look at RevPAR, which is a great metric. It stands for revenue per available room. It's a metric that comes from the hotels. I like to tell people to think of it as revenue per available night in the short-term rental space. And that's a nice combination of your occupancy and your ADR. So you can think of it as occupancy is going to be getting the people in the seats. ADR is going to be how much you get for it. RevPAR tells you how much you actually make for every day that you have available. Then we're also going to look at your booking window, and we're going to look at the LOS, which stands for length of stay as well. We've seen a lot of compression when it comes to booking windows pretty much across the United States. And we've also seen some longer lengths of stay and some shorter lengths of stay, depending on where you're at. And then kind of the final thing that we'll talk about is just a real life example, looking at a rural versus an urban market, specifically looking at San Diego, California versus Joshua Tree. All right. So now let's talk a little bit about PriceLabs. I'm not going to be too salesy on you guys right here, so just give me like 20 seconds to talk about it. If you don't know who PriceLabs is, we're a revenue management and pricing solution for short-term rentals, boutique hotels, pretty much anybody in a rental space. We were founded in 2014, and we currently price about 500,000 listings globally. Our headquarters is in Chicago. Got a full global team. If you're pretty much anywhere in the world, you've got a PriceLabs teammate pretty close to you. But specifically out here in the States, we're all over the place. I'm personally in Knoxville, Tennessee. Got teammates in California, South Carolina, Minnesota, all over the place. So the last thing I want to point out here, we did just win the 2025 Best Supplier Award from the Strive Awards. So I'm very excited about that. It's a fun little badge we got on there. That's enough about that.
Nice.
Thank you. So now, what does PriceLabs offer? Again, we've mainly focused on the dynamic pricing, but we are also a full data provider. So if you want to look at your own portfolio and how it performs, we've got a tool for that. If you want to look into a broad market, we've got a tool for that for you. If you want to look up an estimation for a potential property you might be pulling on, we've got that for you as well. So if you're not a PriceLabs user, give us a try. Come check out what we've got. That's it. I'm done selling. So now let's talk about the U.S. market. And before I get into the slides, there's not going to be a ton of attainable things that you can get out of this, but I will try to talk about the segments of the market. And it's important whenever you're looking at your own data to remember that you want to look as close to your own market as possible. So even though we're going to be covering the US, you're going to get some good tips out of this. Try to dive in a little bit closer to the segment that you currently represent. If you're an apartment complex, make sure you compare to apartment complexes. If you're a super nice single family home, compare to single family homes. But with that, let's talk about how much people are really wanting to come to short-term rentals. That's what we've gathered. In the past year, so starting in June of 2023 all the way up to June of 2025, so technically the past 2 years, we've seen substantial growth. Just in the past year, we've seen 6% increase on book nights. And if you think about that, 6% doesn't sound like a crazy number, but we're literally talking about going from like 17 million book nights in the month of June 2024 up to like 18.5 million nights. So there's a ton of demand. I think everybody knows that with demand and what we've seen in short-term rentals, supply has also increased substantially. It's a little bit more competitive. Before we get off of this, though, I do want to point out, if we're looking at this graph right here from left to right, we see a little bit more growth on the left side. So June that we see over here on the left from 2023 going up to 2024 and 2025 was a substantial increase. But as we're actually looking at 2025 and comparing it, so this one on the far right, we've got May, there was actually a slight decrease. You see in April, just a slight increase. And again, what we're seeing, I think, in 2025 is a lot of standardization in some of these metrics that you see. So we know that over the past year, book nights have gone up, but as of April and May, it was kind of flat compared to the last year. Now let's take a look at the overall occupancy in the market. So again, if we look at the left side of this, this is going to be the late 2024 going into 2025. And what we see is that the red is on top of the black pretty much across the board. Where that red is on top of the black, that means that occupancy was increasing. So for June of 2023, going into June of 2024, occupancy increased 4%. That's with massive supply increases. So that's always good to see. That reflects those book nights as well that we saw. We get over to the right side of this graph, you start to see a little bit of the black being parallel with the red, even the red being a little bit lower. What that's indicating is that occupancies kind of come down in the past few months. Now, we don't have June 2025 represented in here, but it was flat with last year. It's very similar to what you have with April. So we're seeing, again, kind of like we're getting into the healthy part of the market where everything's kind of falling in line. And what that indicates to me is you need to be really aware of what's happening. The more focused you can be on the data close to you, the better you're going to be prepared to perform and to beat these other people in the market with you. So that one, we talked a little bit about occupancy. Now, ADR is one that has been pretty much across the board outside of March that we see right here. It's been going up. Now, that doesn't mean if you have a property that's, you know, the bottom 10% of the market that you're going to be able to charge more. What this means is people are paying more for the better quality properties, staying a little bit longer as well. That's what you get out of this. Now, there's a ton of great inventory coming into the market. Those are helping with the ADRs coming up. But also, we can see that it's not growing quite at the clip that it was last year. So while ADRs increased over 2% the past 12 months, I think if we look forward, you would see ADR probably sitting about the same going across the board. Now, the summer is going to be fantastic. When we look at July and how it ends overall for the United States, it'll be really high. There was a ton of 4th of July traffic, more so than in previous years. So that we will see July is going to be pretty booming. But once we get past July, I think you're going to see a lot of standardization and you're going to be able to price your property. If you were able to get bookings last year, you're going to be able to price your property very similar and achieve similar results.
Nice. And I think, Kyle, you're doing a great job so far of kind of calling out that this is kind of, this is the US as a whole. And
Yes.
so this is very much a macro picture. And so some people might be thinking already like, well, my ADR has been way better than last year, or it's been way worse kind of thing. And so I think it's just good to call out that this is just kind of the macro trends that we're starting with. We'll get a little into the nitty gritty a bit more next.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are a PriceLabs customer, or if you're not, again, reach out to support@pricelabs.co. If you have some questions about the market, somebody on our team is always happy to help look at that stuff as well. And there are a lot of great tools out there for you to get this information as well. We're talking Hospitable and PriceLabs right here, but there's plenty of areas out there that you can get, or plenty of vendors that you can get great information. I love shouting out Key Data. I hope you don't mind me shouting them out, but Key Data is a great resource to look at this as well. All right. So now let's talk about RevPAR. So RevPAR is that combination that I talked about of occupancy and ADR. So it looks at what we're seeing right now is an ADR number. How much money do you make per available night? So if you have 30 nights that are available and you get 50% booked, that's a great indicator. That's a nice way to be able to look at and say, okay, I'm 50% booked. I know what my occupancy total is. But if you're 50% booked at a low rate, you would be able to compare now RevPAR to your previous performance and really get a good view of your the health of your account and the health of your listing. So what we can see here, further out, June, July of 2023, 24, heading into this year, RevPAR was growing pretty consistently. And as we've gotten closer to 2025, RevPAR has started to become a little bit more flat, or even in March, we can see it's behind. Again, this is broad view of everything. If you are a host that is really in here doing what you need to do, making sure that your property is listed correctly, making sure you're pulling levers and getting people in there, this stuff can be completely different for you. So there's always room to grow your RevPAR, but overall what we're seeing is a little bit of a flattening. Those high-end people, they're probably still growing it. People on the bottom end of the market, though, the people that aren't investing in their property, they're going to be seeing their RevPAR go down. Can't see it on this graph, but that's kind of one of those things that you see in data that will bring last year closer to this year. We know those people with great properties are still performing. It's those people towards the bottom that may not be performing quite as well. All right, and now this is super important. And this, I think, is going to be the biggest takeaway from our conversation today, Miles. And that is the upcoming occupancy trends. So what we're looking at on this graph, the top line, is where the market finished for that month last year. So July that we're looking at over here on the left, July of 2024 finished at 64% occupancy for the overall United States market. Now, I think we know certain places, San Diego in July, you're going to get 85, 90% occupancy. If you're in the Smoky Mountains in July, you should probably have between 75 and 85% occupancy. If you're in Joshua Tree, as we'll see in a little bit, you're probably going to be struggling to get that level of occupancy because of the heat. Same with Phoenix, Arizona. It's going to be hard for you to get 85% occupancy in July, without paying astronomical rates. But we see it finishes at 64% as of the day that we created this graph. So let's just go ahead and say, as of today, the market was at 30% occupancy last year. This year, it's at 27%. We know supply's gone up. Occupancy number is behind. You can look at this and say there's two possible options. One, the market's not going to reach where it reached last year. Maybe we don't get to that 64%. Or by looking at a little bit extra data, which I'll show you on the next slide, you'll be able to say, hey, maybe it still gets to 64%. It just gets there a little bit later than it did previously. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we've seen a ton of. So yes, the market may be down slightly in occupancy when these finish. July of 2025, when we look at it in August 15th or so, it may finish at 63%. But the way I would look at this is say, hey, we're still going to hit that 64. It's just coming a little bit later. And where I'm getting that from is right here. These are the booking window trends. And this is the first graph I've pulled up where everything 2025 versus 2024 is lower. So essentially what a booking window is when is that average time that people are booking. Just because we look here and we see May has 25 does not necessarily mean that you want to get booked 25 days out. That's just the average of when people are coming in. You still succeed by getting a booking 60 days out. You still succeed by getting a booking 3 days out. But on average, this is when a majority of those bookings are coming in. And what we can see is they are all kind of going down a little bit. And depending on your market, it could, there's a few markets where maybe you extend a little bit and the booking window is gone up, but pretty much everywhere has gone down. Depending on where you're at, if you're in a city, we're going to look at San Diego here in a little bit. If you're in Chicago, you may literally not get a booking until 4 days out and still be able to achieve a really great ADR on that, because it's just the way that consumers are looking now. So basically what we've got here, if you think about it, 12 months ago, regardless of what month you were in, you had about, on average, 5 to 6 extra days to get it booked out. Now it's getting a little bit tighter. You want to make sure you are in line with your rates before you see these numbers. So, but ideally you have your rates exactly where they have to be, at least by this date. And again, you want to be specific with your market. Some markets, if you have a 5-bedroom house and you wait till 25 days out to get your rates in line, you're going to be struggling. 5-bedroom booking window is going to be very different than what a studio apartment is. Keep in mind, this is everything. We're looking at, with this 25 days, 12-bedroom houses in the Smoky Mountains and one, studio apartments attached to somebody's property in Bend, Oregon as well. The better you can get at diving in this and looking at your specifics, the better you will actually be able to perform with this data. So keep in mind, booking windows going down. Whenever you start looking at data, try to compare apples to apples. If you've got a 2-bedroom property, try to compare it to 2 bedrooms. If you've got a 5-bedroom, try to compare it to 5s as well. So hopefully that one gets us helped out a bit. And then this one also, not going to spend a ton of time, but the length of stay trend. Again, this is for the whole United States. This includes midterm rentals. This includes people staying for a year at a property. Dive in more locally and more specifically. But what we've seen is essentially across the board, length of stay has gone up. Here in just a second, we're going to look at that rural versus urban, and we're going to look at San Diego versus Joshua Tree, and they're going to be totally, totally different. So before we move on to that, Miles, do you have any questions or anything you'd want for me to cover for the audience?
I think just one question on that previous slide. When we're looking at kind of, the lead time on the booking window. So I guess something to caveat here, obviously, again, you kind of need to look at your local data and kind of for your property and what the typical booking window is. But I guess something to kind of call out is, if the window is declined, and you're used to kind of doing a price drop in those final couple of weeks potentially to try and fill up the occupancy, as some hosts do, it can sometimes be worth kind of waiting a little longer to do that, right? If the booking window is dropping in your market, something to be considered, I guess.
That is correct. If the booking window is compressing like this, you can hold on to your rate a little bit longer. But again, you want to make sure that you are respecting the quality of your property as well. If it is super, super high echelon, you can hold on to that rate for a lot longer than you can with something that's a little bit more, I'm not trying to be disrespectful whatsoever, but something that might be cookie cutter or, has a competitor right next to you that looks just like you. Those you need to be a little bit more early on your pull, on your strings that you pull, but you're 100% right, Miles.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, let's get into that urban versus rural then.
All right. So right now, what we're going to be looking at, your red lines, they were indicating this year versus last year. Red's going to be indicating for us going forward, San Diego. Black is going to be indicating for us Joshua Tree on these. So the number one thing that we can see is San Diego during the summer months has occupancy. Joshua Tree doesn't. Makes total sense. San Diego's got the beautiful weather. If you look specifically here at the highest point of occupancy for San Diego, it's in July. And every July, San Diego has one of the biggest events in the comic book space. It's the San Diego Comic Con. It draws so many people to that area. And you can clearly see that reflected here with the occupancy increases that we see. Now, Joshua Tree has a very different season. Now, these places are pretty close to each other. Not, they're drivable, we'll say. They're not going to be right next to each other. But it's so interesting to be able to see how differently these markets move. And it's important to understand what your seasonality truly is. And Any dynamic pricing tool is going to help you with that, but you really need to know when your peak seasons are so that you can take advantage of all of this. If you are in San Diego and you are pricing your February and March highest, you're going to lose out on money. Same exact thing if you're in, Key West, Florida, or you're in Wisconsin Dells. If you're not pricing the right time right, you're going to be missing out on things. So just a quick little view of how they differ. And then now we're going to look at ADR. And these follow very, very similar patterns, versus the occupancy that we saw. The lines are pretty similar. Maybe you don't get as much ADR in February, March, and April as you would think you would based off occupancy. But you can see, prioritize those peaks. The biggest peak that we have, again, San Diego. Look at the ADR for July in San Diego as compared to everywhere else. And that, you could charge a heck of a lot in San Diego for Comic-Con. That is for sure. I've worked with customers, and it's amazing what you can get for these festivals, for these events, for sporting events. I mentioned earlier, I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee. Go Vols. Got my little rifleman over here. But you have to make sure that you are prioritizing those football weekends, that graduation weekend if you're in a college town. It's so important to understand when you can create extra value and when you want to go ahead and have your rates at a reasonable level trying to get booked out. So hypothetically, let's say one of the listeners is in San Diego. You're going in and you're wanting to build out your strategy for the next year. July of 2026 needs to be prioritized for you. Go ahead and build that out so it's a little bit higher up. Keep your rates a little bit more, you don't want to say towards the bottom of the market, but more towards that 50th percentile of the market when you're getting into the cooler months. San Diego is lovely 365 days out of the year, but when March comes, people want to ski. That's essentially what you're seeing in that. All right. And now we're going to look a little bit about that booking window again. And you mentioned, Miles, and I apologize for not bringing this in there. You mentioned the term lead time. Lead time is the exact same thing as booking window for what we're referencing. So anytime you see those, it's referring to the average amount of time that you have. The average amount of time it takes for the overall market for bookings. If you're looking at an individual booking, the lead time is how many days out did they book it from the day that they're staying. Anyways, not trying to over-explain things or overcomplicate it for you guys. But when we look at the booking window, again, red San Diego, gray is going to be for Joshua Tree. And if we highlight that July area, you should have your rates at a bookable rate for San Diego much further out than you need to for January. People are looking to book in San Diego way further out. They got a lot of plans to make. Whereas if we're looking at January, you've got a booking window of about 15 days. So it's literally 33% of July's booking window. Now you can go in there and say, January, I got some time to work on this. People are going to be coming in for the last minute weekend trips and all of that. So interesting how different these are. And they usually correlate. If you're able to achieve a higher ADR, you should usually expect that booking window to be a little bit further out than you would for a month that you aren't able to achieve a high ADR. There's some instances where that may be different. A ski market's a great example. You want to have your rates really good way far out. That way somebody can book you a year in advance at a high rate if you want to. But you also can hold on to those rates a lot longer because you never know. You get a lot of powder here, on Thursday. People might want to come out there on Saturday and you can still charge for it. So there's so many little things that you got to pay attention to. But the one thing I want you to keep in mind is that the times where you can get the most ADR, those are your priority. Those are where you can make the majority of your money. And I said ADR, I should say RevPAR, but those months that have the most eyes, the most value to them, prioritize those as you're going through and setting rates and projecting what you think you might accomplish next year for sure. Then the last one that we've got on here that I want to hit on is the length of stay. And very, very different markets. San Diego is an easy fly to market. People can stick around. Joshua Tree, you got to want to get out there. But it's interesting to see that people go out to Joshua Tree, and this is very reflective of a lot of rural markets. They want to do the weekend trips. They want to do the shorter stays. Now, again, this is just kind of an average type of a look. It's not how everybody's going to be. But the rural markets tend to get those little bit shorter stays. You see longer length of stays when we're averaging things this way, because in cities, you get the people that go there for midterm stays. You get the traveling nurses, the traveling doctors, the people that are booking 3 months and 6 months and all of that. You don't have a lot of that. I mean, specifically with Joshua Tree, you don't really have a 3-month window to go stay in Joshua Tree unless you just love that area and love being in a rural spot. So that is why we see it here. I don't want you to think, if anybody listening has a property in Chicago and then has one on the outskirts of Chicago, that you just inherently can get longer stays. It's very dependent on your properties, very dependent on your locations, all of that. So as an example, San Diego, we see 4s and 5s. If I go and I look and do my research really close to all of the hospitals in San Diego, you would probably see this length of stay much longer. If I get away from that stuff and I go to the more beachy areas and that, you would see those length of stays probably being a little bit shorter as well. So keep that in mind. Location is super important to your analysis. Yeah. Any questions you got for me, Miles?
Cool. Yeah, I think you kind of talked about events earlier, and I would love to get your thoughts on how something like, Super Bowl is always a big one, right? That's not it's not every weekend, and it's not a ton of markets, but also thinking about more the soccer side of things. So like the FIFA World Cup coming up next year, bunch of host cities across the US. So that's June and July next year. How should people be thinking about that? Because I know that, there'll be some listeners in those markets. They're probably thinking, well, how can I be capitalizing on that? I can imagine that the ADR and the booking window is going to be pretty big on both of those. Just want to get your thoughts, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And right now is a great time for you to plan this stuff out if you are in any of these cities that the World Cup's in. Here in a few months, I'm actually going to be participating in an event in Kansas City where we're going to be talking to hosts and basically saying like, hey, right now is the biggest time that you've got. Let's go for it. And I want to take a step back and I want to address that there's so much nuance when it comes to these events as well. A great example of something very recently that happened that people thought, oh man, we're going to make so much money. And it just didn't really come to fruition is the NFL draft in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Everybody stayed really, really high. And there just didn't seem to be a lot of, plenty of people showed up. Green Bay was great. It had tons of people, but it just didn't perform the way people were expecting. So there was a lot of last minute, hey, rip this down and yank it.
Yeah.
That is not a concern with the World Cup. The biggest concern with the World Cup is those matchups. If you're in Kansas City and you get the United States versus Germany, you're going to be able to charge some crazy, crazy high rates. If you end up with Costa Rica versus Qatar, you're going to end up with some crazy high rates. These are things, a lot of people may be coming to the United States for the first time for this. The best thing I can say is get yourself ready, get yourself visible, and pay attention to the schedules and the calendars. You don't want a booking right now, in my opinion. You need to see who the actual matchups are. You need to be able to prioritize it. I don't know the exact calendar off the top of my head, but my advice to everybody listening to this, if you're in a market, put your rates high. Make sure it's available, though. You want people to see you. Like if I'm going there, if I'm deciding to go and I'm like, I might take a trip to Kansas City regardless of who it is. I'm going to go and I'm going to set my minimum stay to something that's realistic. 4, 5, 7 nights right now is fine because you're protecting it. You just want to be visible. Set your rates really high. Make sure your photos are in line. Make sure you have your amenities and all that stuff. Keep in mind, you're going to have a lot of people from different cultures and different backgrounds coming in. I tell you, the one thing I would love to see from property managers and from hosts is ask the people what they want. It's not going to hurt you to put $100, bidet in if somebody wants it, or it's not I think there's so much opportunity for this. If you're in one of these markets, be visible now, have a ridiculously high rate. That way people see it. Maybe put something in your listing that says, hey, once the schedules are announced, this rate becomes more realistic. Communication's key. Make these people happy, show them what America's about, and hopefully our boys in the red, white, and blue can, maybe make it out of the group stage for once.
Nice, I love it. I'm up here in Canada, so I'll be rooting for red and white, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or the same for back in England as well. Nice. No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think one great thing there, really that international audience as well. So it's kind of separate from pricing, but yeah, thinking about that this isn't, even if you're normally more of a drive-in market kind of thing, you are catering to a much wider audience this time around.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this, I think, is a great opportunity as well. And, if you're listening to this and you're in the Smokies, it's not going to impact you quite as much. If you're in Richmond, Virginia, it's not going to impact you quite as much. If you're in one of these cities that's going to be World Cup hosting, or you're close enough to it, it is the perfect time for you to really, really separate yourself, make some money, and, become somebody in your space. So
nice. Love it. Cool.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that's pretty much all I've got. I've got a couple of extra little final insights in here. There's nothing exceptional in here, and it honestly looks like I forgot to finish my last little line in here. But so overall, we saw a little bit of an increase in occupancy. We saw an increase in RevPAR and an increase in ADR. But going into 2025, it has gotten a little bit smaller. So I would say 2025 has been pretty flat as an overall view. The median booking window has decreased significantly, 11%. The average length of stay is increasing. We did see a limited growth in March, and I know we're in July right now, but I think it's really important to point this out so that people forward thinking can think about it. In March this past year, spring breaks in the United States went from about 3 really, really good weeks to 2 really good weeks. But the big mover was Easter Sunday. Easter Sunday went from March into April. So that changed everything. That changed your quarterly projections. That changes everything. Pay attention to the events. If you're in a sports town, know when the home games are. But there's so much opportunity in those events, so much opportunity in weather, and so much opportunity in you being aware of the market. Last kind of thing I want to point out, we've been talking a bunch about revenue management in the space for a while now. It's pretty much been figured out that about 35 to 40% of people are using dynamic pricing at this point. There's still a huge opportunity for everybody. And by using those tools and getting in there and, having somebody help you understand this data makes a big difference to your overall revenue generation ability.
100%. Nice. And yeah, so I think the final caveat with all this is, as Kyle's kind of talked through, this is kind of the big picture view that we're looking at big markets and we're not looking specific property types or something like that. But it's more just a case of, here are some of the different metrics you want to be looking at, paying attention to. And I guess some of those trends, if you're seeing those in your market or you're seeing the reverse, hopefully we've given you some tips on what you should be considering and thinking about and planning for your own market.
Absolutely. And anybody that takes the time to listen to this, I love people that love learning. Feel free, if you're on here, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to help. I can't sit there and review accounts and go full on in depth with you. But if you have simple questions about revenue management or just want some advice or whatever, I'm always happy to help as well.
Nice. Appreciate it. Okay. Excellent. Kyle, thank you very much. That was great.
It was wonderful chatting with you, Miles, and we'll see you very soon.
Likewise. Thank you.
See you. Bye-bye. All right.